Well, Coach, I appreciate you squeezing in some time for us this morning. I mean, first, welcome to Waco, and how is the transition going in this whirlwind of a spring for you and your family?
Yeah, I mean, it is a whirlwind. Good word. It's just been hard to even slow down. Was here for a week, went home for a week to try to clean things out with the Dream and my apartment there, and then back here this week to really start engaging, in recruiting high school players. And so, still in that hiring process with staff. Still, connecting to our players who will be back on campus in a week to start summer school. So, just a lot going on in general.
You mentioned still in the hiring process of staff. You mentioned players were your priority. What's that progress like on the staff end?
Yeah, I mean, with the players, it's been great. Certainly, we weren't going to keep everyone, and it's going to be a personal decision, but feel good about the progress we've made in that area. Certainly, still want to add some players this summer in the portal just to give us some depth. When it comes to hiring, I mean, it's been, got Tari hired pretty quickly, Sophia hired pretty quickly, have my ops person in place. And so at least we know what we're doing in the office now and getting organized. Hope to have 2 more assistants hired, within a week so that they're here in time for the players to get back on campus, as well as June 1st when you can start to have official visits, unofficial visits, people on campus in general.
You had a couple of other really successful assistants who hadn't decided their future at your introductory press conference, and Satia Messer, who has had coaching experience herself, and Bill Brock, who's been here for all 3 national championships. Have you guys made any determination on whether they would stay on your staff at Baylor or go on to their next chapter?
Yeah, and certainly those are some decisions that are part theirs and certainly part ours in terms of how we view them fitting in. But I think, just still talking, I guess I would leave it at that, and I think for them, them allowing them to have, those announcements and those moments, just kind of want to leave it that way, general.
During your press conference, Matt kind of laid out what the process looked like from the Baylor end and what drew Baylor to you. I want to turn that around and ask you, what was it for you that made this the right fit to leave the WNBA?
Yeah, I mean, it happened really, really quickly, obviously. People ask how quickly I knew. I mean, I didn't know. I always said, I thought I might be just there thinking outside the box candidate, as I wasn't a name that was being mentioned in all the social media and things. And I'd had a couple people ask me, and I'm like, certainly I'm not going to Baylor. But, when I had my interview with them, it was that process. I mean, it was a 7-hour process, jokingly, after about 3 hours, I had told my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter that morning, hey, we'll get brunch together when I'm done with this interview. And I reached out to her 3 hours in and said, okay, maybe lunch, and it ended up being dinner, by the time all was said and done. So really it was that conversation that day. It was obviously I was the one answering most of the questions, but there was enough conversation amongst that hiring committee that I felt like I was getting a feel for what it was like at Baylor, and if they were any indication of the people at Baylor, then that was a great place to start. And so, for me, over the course of that day, learning more and more, learning about the pavilion, understanding more about Baylor and how good all their sports were. Certainly I was aware, but maybe not to the level that how successful all the teams were. But then, even talking to Scott Drew, and him saying, you'll love Waco. I mean, it was just kind of all those things together that made me feel like there's a stability in this. There's an excitement of being back and mentoring young people, having a community around you, not feeling like you have to consistently fight for attention in your own marketplace, and, which is just a part of the W. You're constantly kind of fighting for a little tidbit of space, in the grander scheme of sports.
You've brought up the mentoring aspect several times. Why is the mentor aspect of coaching so important to you, and why was that kind of the catalyst, so to speak, in you going back from the WNBA back to the college game?
I think it's the biggest difference. I think that in some ways basketball is basketball, X's and O's are X's and O's. Certainly with different levels of talent, there's different things you can do, X's and O's, but that's the difference. In the WNBA, you manage personalities. I mean, that's what you do. You certainly add free agents that fit who you are and what you want to do. But these are grown women, you know, that they are at their point in their life where certainly some of them are less mature than others, but you know, you're always dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds at the college level, and you're getting them at a time when you can help build their confidence, and not just confidence on the basketball floor, but teach them about life after basketball, teach them about financial literacy, teach them about things that are bigger, you know, than basketball. And so that's just important to me. I think as a parent, you know, and having kids that see themselves maybe being in sports at the collegiate level, I'm going to want coaches that are going to pour into them, invest into who they are and how they can grow, and so that when they walk away at 22 or 23, that they're more prepared to be like, you know, independent humans that can succeed and not have to live in mom and dad's basement.
This is to have that component and to be back at a program that has the tradition it has in women's basketball, even if it just started 21 years ago with 19 out of 20 NCAA tournament appearances in that time. You've brought up you don't feel pressure to live up to the expectations. You feel you can meet those. What is it about the job and about yourself that makes you feel so confident and that you can, and you're not worried about trying to be the next Kim Mulkey, you're trying to just be Nicki Collen in this program?
Yeah, I just feel like it starts with I will fail. I will absolutely fail if I try to be someone besides myself, you know, and obviously Kim did it her way and had amazing success and consistent. I mean, it was the consistency of success that made it so special here. You know, I think I've reached a point in my life. I'm not 25 years old. I've been a lot of places. I've worked with a lot of people. And I define success a little differently, you know. Success is certainly wins and losses and banners, but it's also what are the relationships you've built? What is the legacy when these players walk away, you know, that they gained in their experience at Baylor? Yes, it's important that they can say they have 4 rings or they have 3 rings, but it's also important that they've built relationships, that they have connected spiritually, that they've done a great job in academics, because basketball isn't forever. And you know, you think about all of Baylor's success, there's still just a handful of Baylor players that are playing in the WNBA, you know, so it takes time, and most players aren't going to make a living playing basketball after this. So have I prepared them the best I can, you know, to be successful in whatever career path that is when they leave here? So do we want to win? Yes. Is it going to look a little different? Yes. But I just know that I'm going to hire people and have a staff that's going to work hard and, you know, really be committed to these players. And I think that's going to be the cornerstone of what our success can look like.
You've brought up players, and I want to talk about players first. I mean, you come in and you meet with the players when you first get to Waco. What's that conversation like when you're talking to, and it was in the practice gym, wasn't it?
Right.
When you're talking to a gym full of players that you haven't coached yet, and you've pointed out you didn't recruit them to Waco. What was that conversation like?
Well, it started with, you know, it was kind of funny because we had a Zoom call the night before, right after I told my team in Atlanta that I was leaving. So it had a little bit of a base, you know, but obviously that didn't feel very conversational. You know, it was Mac introducing me to them, and then, you know, even in the gym, that conversation was a little staged. You know, there was a lot of media, there was a lot of extra people. You know, not that I'm not comfortable in that setting, but when you're trying to meet people, there's no intimacy in that. There's no ability to truly connect. And so, you know, even pulling them in a little bit in a huddle and saying, you know, hey, I'm going to meet with you guys, and, you know, we're going to figure out what your why is, and we're going to figure out why you're here, and we're going to figure out what you're passionate about, and we're going to figure out how I can help you, you know, and that's what's important to me. And so that meeting was in some ways for show to some degree. Certainly it was me. I mean, I didn't say anything that I wouldn't say in a closed setting, but I also think it was an opportunity to lead to, okay, we're going to have individual conversations, and we're going to find out a little bit about each other, and I'm going to, you know, be vulnerable with you, and like, here's what I'm thinking, and what are you thinking, and all of those things. So it was kind of a lead in to, we all have a why. My family's my why. You know, they allow me to follow my dreams. You know, how can I help you, you know, get your dreams or achieve your dreams?
So it's safe to say you feel good coming out of those conversations with every one of these players.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to keep them all. You know, I think ultimately some of them have gone in the transfer portal, but you know, that doesn't mean that the door is still not open for those to reconsider. You know, and I think it was important to keep the core together. But not everyone's going to look at a new situation and not have doubts. And we had players that were telling me that they were ready to go regardless. You know, that this one-time transfer, this COVID situation, you know, is opening different doors for them to be able to go and play right away. And so because of that, you know, that makes that an easier decision, especially if they had relationships that predated, you know, them coming to Baylor. So I feel good about the roster we have, but it doesn't mean that you know, I'm batting 1,000.
Keeping on the topic of players, but kind of changing courses, you mentioned and you've talked about during your introduction, there's not a deep roster of Baylor players in the WNBA. I think off the top of my head I can count 6. Mm-hmm. What steps do you want to take in trying to, or how important is it to build that number up and increase your program's presence in the highest level of women's basketball in our country?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big part about the W is like how versatile are you and how positionless, and those are the same things kind of. You know, when you have 11 and 12 player rosters, you don't have a ton of specialists. If you're a great shooter, you might make the league, but if you can't guard anybody or, you know, and so it's hard if you're not a versatile player. And so I think it's about, you know, my offensive system is going to be more pro-like. So I think, you know, recruiting players that fit our system will translate. And that always happens in the pros. I mean, I'll use a player as an example. Like Megan Gustafson is a great player who shot 70% and was National Player of the Year a couple years ago. Her game has had trouble translating to the pros because she didn't play a lot of pick and roll basketball, didn't have much of a perimeter game, and you know, she's not 6'7". And so at 6'3", trying to play against Griner and Fouls and some of the great centers in this league, you have to develop, you know, your game and be more versatile. And I think for her, you know, that wasn't Lisa Bluter's fault. She's a great coach. They won a ton of games. They had amazing success at Iowa when she was there. But, you know, how they played didn't lend itself to her being a pro. And so you have to have some balance of, if you want to put players in the pros, you have to have a pro system, because that's what we're looking at. You know, when I'm scouting, you know players at UConn, obviously they were some of the best players coming out of high school. So you start with talent, but then you develop the talent in a pro-styled system. Those players make really quick adjustments to the WNBA. And that's why Crystal Dangerfield was Rookie of the Year last year, you know, as a second-round pick, because that wasn't new to her, that level, that expectation, as well as how they played. And so, you know, I think it's just going to be a part of it. And not every kid's going to have that dream of being a WNBA player, but, you know, I know what it takes to get there, and I know what it takes to stay there, which is, quite frankly, the bigger thing. You know, like, once you're in, you tend to stick around for a while, but it's hard if you don't get in right away. It's hard to stay. You know, it's hard to get back.
Talking about your current roster again, you mentioned keeping the core intact, and you look on social media, and Nalissa Smith and Queen Egbo, Caitlin Bickle, who all came in together in that 2018 recruiting class, have been telling Baylor fans they're staying in Waco. How excited does that make you to keep those 3 for the coming season?
Yeah, really excited. And a lot of it is that, as much as, you know, Baylor has been known as a high-low system offense and had great success defensively, as well as how they play offensively, to me, those are players that can play in space. They can run, they can rim protect, they can, you know, they can do all the things. They can play in pick and rolls. And so I think our system, you know, we're not trying to, you know, take, you know, square pegs and put them in round holes. Like, I'm taking players that certainly were successful playing that way, but also I think the way they play, their athleticism, their length is going to translate to how we want to play immediately. And so rather than feeling like you have to implement a system but then kind of taper it to like what your roster looks like, I feel like we have a roster full of players that can already play the way we want to play, which makes it easier to implement it. So definitely excited about them, excited about their skill set, know they can defend, I think Caitlin has a chance to potentially have a breakout and get some more shots and things like that. But really excited about where we're headed with those guys.
You have a grad transfer come in right before the coaching change in an all-SEC guard in Jordan Lewis, and all indications are on social media that she's planning to stay at Baylor. Are you able to say that that's the case?
Yeah, she's really committed. She's, ironically, Jordan Lewis, I recruited her my last year coaching at Florida Gulf Coast. She's an Orlando kid, played with Central Florida Elite. We had her on campus, it kind of came down to FGCU, Clemson, and Alabama. So have followed her career, have been in SEC country, and talked to her the night I got the job, and she's excited. I mean, she's utilizing this 6th year as a year to get ready to be a pro. And so I think for her, this is a perfect opportunity to play for someone who knows what it takes to get there.
To have someone of that caliber who's just starting the transfer process announce they're going to stick around, how excited did that make you coming into this program?
Well, I think when you have a veteran that has gotten better each and every year, statistically her three-point percentage has increased, she's just gotten more and more confident, so to have someone in that position I think is really important from a leadership perspective. And obviously Baylor's had a ton of success with grad transfers the last few years, and so continuing kind of that legacy I think is important. But even with Jordan, I didn't have to convince her that I was the right coach for her, because of other people that were already convincing her, whether it was her AAU coach or people that know me or know of me. That made it easier to have that intro conversation where she was coming to Baylor to become a pro, to win a national championship, and it would have been very easy for her to pivot, but I think it was the people around her that immediately said, this is going to be a great thing for you, that made that really easy for me.
Staying on the topic of transfers, the college game has changed since you left for the WNBA 5 years ago. Transfer portal is there. It's very real. You just mentioned that this is a program that's had a lot of success in the transfer portal. It won a title with a transfer point guard. It won 2 conference titles after that with transfer guards in the lineup. I mean, how has recruiting changed in your eyes since you last worked in a college program?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest change is not the portal itself, other than the ease of going into it and not having to get, signed copies from coaches saying that, you can talk to people and all that. The portal hasn't changed. It's just, I think what's changed is the idea of this one-time transfer. And then what you add on top of that, the COVID year, and so players having 5th and 6th years and in that situation. So that's the biggest change. And it's, people keep asking me, is it like free agency? It's absolutely like free agency. Everyone's an unrestricted free agent as soon as they go into the portal. And I think where I hope that we stay, in line with understanding what college athletics should be about, that people aren't recruiting rosters before they're in the portal, because that's going to be, kind of the whole, okay, if I talk to the AAU coach and is this kid happy? Oh, well, if they go into the portal, we'd be interested. Then it gets messy, and then I'd be really disappointed with people, because we're about educating players and giving them opportunity. So, I mean, I think you have to be prepared to be aggressive in the portal. If you look at Duke, they changed their entire roster this year with 6 players out of the portal, from all Power 5 leagues, and so you can certainly change your roster in a year by the portal, but I'd like to believe that we're still in the business of thinking about how we're going to develop players over a 4-year period, and that bringing young players in is still going to be the priority. And then when you get to the point where you either lose somebody or there's someone that can make you a little better, then you pick them up. You pick up a Dejanay Carrington or a Taya Cooper or a Chloe Jackson, and I think that whole graduate transfer thing is still going to be in play even after the COVID, thing gets done. So it's changed, and you just have to prepare and adapt to it.
What is the biggest thing that pops out to you whenever you look up and down the Big 12, the conference you're going to be coaching in, 18 to 21 games a year? What's the biggest thing that stands out to you in this conference?
I think the interesting thing about the Big 12, and it's always been, because I'm always evaluating, in the pros, and you're looking at these teams, and the Big 12, the styles are very different. If you look at the SEC, the teams all play pretty similarly. They're all very athletic. They all play athletically. You know, their systems are built that way. I think when you look at the Big 12, you just have such a variety of styles. I mean, I've known Bill Fenley like since I was 16 years old, you know, and they're going to shoot the three and play a lot of zone and do it their way. And you know, Oklahoma has a new coach, so we've got to see how that adapts. But you know, you just know that you're going to get different styles. Texas is going to be athletic and press every chance they get, and Vic is going to be relentless in, you know, how he goes about his dribble drive and his pressure defense. And so I think there's a uniqueness to how teams play. So you have to understand how they play, you have to adapt to how they play. And, you know, so I think that's the biggest challenge, is really understanding game to game. Your game plan is going to change, you know, how you have to guard people change. You know, West Virginia is totally different than Kansas State, you know, so I think that's the biggest thing about the Big 12.
Why is the player-centric method of the WNBA the biggest thing that you said sticks out in the biggest lesson you learned as you come back to the college ranks?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important because, you know, in college so often, because players come and go and there's always turnover, you know, it becomes the coaches, you know, are the centerpiece sometimes of the programs as opposed to the players. In the pros, you know, the players are the pros. Diana Taurasi is the WNBA. A lot of people could not name half the coaches in the WNBA, let alone 2 or 3 a lot of times. And so I think that idea of focusing on the players, having them be a central focus, you know, making sure that we're doing whatever we can in terms of helping them academically, helping them spiritually, helping them with mental health, like prioritizing like their holistic approach to who they are and how we can help them grow. And that can come down to how we treat their recovery. You know, are we giving them the best opportunity to use their athletic gifts? And so, I mean, when you're in the pros, you're constantly in that mode of understanding player recovery and understanding load management. Like, you don't hear load management in college very often, and some of it is you don't play 4 games in 7 days very often. You may play 3 games in a tournament back to back to back, but then your schedule evens out. But taking some of those methods of how we treat players and how we make them focal points in our program is the same way you would do organizationally or franchise-wise in the pros.
So you mentioned player recovery. So when you come in, you see a facility like this with everything in it. Does that make you excited and make you feel like you can do that well with the roster you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think this place, I think as much as that, the commitment to resources here. If our players need cryotherapy, if they need dry needling, if they need cupping, if they need Normatex, whatever that looks like, we have the resources to help them to the best of our ability. So I think that's the key. It's this space, having room to train, but also, you know, and having the right people, from your trainers to your strength coaches to your mental health professionals. It's giving them the best chance to be successful all the way around.
So as we near the end of this interview, I want to turn it toward Waco and your family. It's a town with a lot of traditions. Have your sons already expressed interest yet in wanting to try the gut pack at VTEX?
Oh, that is something I've never heard before. So you're going to have to explain that first. So the answer is no. But my daughters know about Fixer Upper. So, you know, they'll be prepared to get to the silos when they come. So yeah, you're going to have to explain that one to me.
I'm too afraid to try the gut pack. It's just this giant monstrosity of barbecue that is famous for whatever reason.
Gut pack.
Yeah. I mean, obviously this is an area a lot of people stick around in for years. Scott's been here since 2003. Kim was here for 20 years. I mean, Rod has been here longer than a lot of baseball coaches in that program, and Glenn Moore's been here for 21 years himself. Was that part of the decision? Because obviously when you move, you have to consider the family. Was that part of the decision in, okay, this is the spot, this is where we're going to go?
Yeah, and it's just not, ultimately it is the community. It's the athletic community, it's the academic community, you know, and even when I thought about Baylor, we had an academic coordinator, Dee Dee Brown Campbell, that left Arkansas and has been here, I don't know, I'm going to say 15 years, it's close to it now. Marcus Sedbury, you know, is an associate AD here. He was at Arkansas. Like, people seem to come here and stay, you know, and so often in this business, it's a very nomadic business. Athletics are, coaches, administrators. It's just part of getting to where you want to go. And the fact that they both, you know, came and stayed, and you look at the longevity of coaches here, they're staying for a reason. And so sometimes that speaks without them having to. And so, yeah, that was a big part, knowing that coaches, once they're here and once they're ingrained in this community, that they want to stay.
How excited, obviously waiting for the end of the school year, how excited is the family to get to Texas?
Well, I think a little bit of trepidation there. I mean, I think they're 16, 16, and 13 right now. Going to be 14 this summer. And so moving is hard. They've done it a number of times as kids of coaches. But I think timing-wise, age-wise, you know, we're just getting them through school, trying to take one day at a time. The good part is, you know, this process happened so quickly that they couldn't process it, you know, before they were here for the press conference. It was just like, wow, this is exciting, and we're on a private plane, and there's cool parts, but like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna miss my friends, and what about lacrosse, and what about cheer? And it becomes like very selfishly driven, which I totally get. But I think as time goes on, they're a little bit more mature about how this plays out, you know, and they've had more time to think about it. So hopefully we find the right spot, you know, but we're not rushing. You know, at this point, it's about me doing my job to the best of my ability and having the time and space to do it.
What is the biggest thing that you would want Baylor fans to know about you? What they'll see, what you hope that they see when they see you coaching on the sidelines?
I think they're gonna. I'm just passionate. I mean, I'm joyful. I'm gonna smile a lot. You know, I mean, when you have dimples, like, and you're little, like, people start telling you to smile when you're really young, and so it's just kind of a part of who I am. Like, I love my job. They're gonna see it. They're gonna feel it. I'm gonna connect to them. And I want my team to reflect that on the court. I want them to be joyful when they play. I want them pointing at one another when one of them makes a good pass to the other, or one of them makes a great defensive play. That's the beauty of a team sport. You know, you can't do it without the four other people. And so, you know, I want them to see that there's an energy. And I've always said, like, you know, I hope that my energy speaks before I do. So hopefully they see that in how I go about really my job as a whole.
My last question, unless there is something that you want to touch on, is you mentioned, I want to go way back, probably 15 minutes ago, you mentioned the pavilion was brought up during your interview process. How much did that play a role, and if so, how much, in your decision to come here, and why?
I would say it was part of the decision. Certainly not, it's not like being in the Farrell Center. I feel like I'm at a competitive disadvantage. What I think it does is create another advantage. I think the space becomes ours, you know? I mean, I think when you're trying to truly create new beginnings, the idea of being able to create a new beginning in a new space and kind of make it yours, and I mean down to picking out carpet and tile and things like that, and really putting your footprint on something. But a lot of it was about even the size of it and having an arena that I think is in today's society, with so many things that people can do besides go to a basketball game. How do we create a setting that can impact fans? And then just even stylistically being able to look at it and say, okay, if I was going to design a basketball arena, it would look a little like that. You know, it would have that feel. So I think it's just really exciting thing to sell to recruits, but also an exciting thing to be able to put, you know, our stamp on.